Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar Today, where we have conversations with CEOs of small, mid-sized businesses, heads of nonprofits, and other community leaders. I'm so excited for the conversation today with Maggie Feldman-Piltch. Maggie is CEO and founder of #NatSecGirlSquad, which is a social impact business community focused on building competent diversity and national security and defense. Just love that mission. She specializes in operational art and innovation and national security strategy through human capital management. She enjoys creating order out of chaos, and we'll hear more about that, and honed her skills in apparel showrooms in New York City at the Conference Board and Risk Cooperative, in addition to serving as the chief of staff to nearly 100 retired senior officers at the American Security Project. Maggie is a regular guest on various podcasts, a sought-after speaker and workshop leader, and is a columnist for Clearance Jobs. Maggie is a graduate of Wesleyan University with honors, as well as Georgetown School of Foreign Service Security Studies program. Because she is so active and can't get enough, she's also working towards an advanced degree in opera performance from the Royal Academy of Music. Please help me welcome Maggie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always so nice to hear someone else read out all the things you've done in your life. It makes you feel much more important than you are. But thank you for having me. This is lovely.
Wonderful. So Maggie, you've accomplished so much. Let's turn the clock back a bit and tell us about the early days of being in school and kind of figuring out what was important to you and what you wanted to focus on.
So, full disclosure, I think if we turn the clock back too far, we'll just end up in my childhood, because I'm not, it's not been that long since I was out of undergrad or graduate school for that matter. But I am, there are moments where I'm quite surprised by what I'm doing. And then there are moments where I'm like, of course. My undergraduate thesis was titled "The Intentional Human Rights Failures of States and Firms." And I argued I argued for multinational corporations to be responsible for fulfilling the human rights of their workers as defined by the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So I basically was like, companies are governments too, and we should have a world government. Pretty far from where I land now, but in some ways. And I really thought that I wanted to work in CSR, corporate social responsibility, for luxury consumer goods, and was like, this is the way you change the world, right? Like, this is how I can enjoy the pretty things that I love, and also do good for other people. And I mean, I was really, really committed to it. And my plan was to, spend a year or two after undergrad getting some sort of life experience and work experience, and then go get an MBA. And I was in the first iteration of the Harvard Business School's online pre-MBA program, HBX. And I studied a lot of economics in undergrad. And I was sitting in, I think like the accounting class or whatever for HBX, Harvard Business Core, I think is what they called it. And I was like, I'm pretty decent at this, but holy hell am I bored. And I just was like, I can't do this. If this is what an MBA program is, I can't do this. And at the same time, I had been working at American Security Project. And I started out there as an unpaid intern, as almost everybody in Washington, D.C. does, same in the city in New York. And I kept looking for other jobs, other things to do, something that would pay me. And I got a couple of offers, but nothing that I was being offered was going to be as cool as what I was doing, right? Nothing could match or beat it. And so I ended up, having a heart-to-heart with the CEO, and I'll come back to all of this because there's always more to the story.
Yes.
And he was like, you don't have to leave. And I was like, I guess you're right. So I ended up staying, and that most good things in my life, I think, can be traced not necessarily all the way back to or because of, but through my time at ASP. And then I could make the same argument for the way I was raised and my time at Wesleyan, right? All of these things are iterative. But, it was an accident, but a happy one at that. I have always been somebody who has had a very clear plan for myself in the long term, and then been more okay than others with an enormous amount of chaos on a day-to-day basis. As long as I have my flagpoles, I can get by and make it work, and I'm quite happy that way. And so it doesn't surprise me that I went from one very clearly articulated plan about getting an MBA and working in CSR to something to other people very, very different. So I ultimately, there are a lot of things that contributed to it. I think a good deal of it was that my senior year of college, I ended up with a concussion, and had to really cut back on the amount of stuff I was doing, so that I could heal properly, and did kind of the one thing you're not supposed to do when you have a concussion, which is watch TV, right? Like look at a screen. And I watched the entirety of The West Wing in a very short period of time, and took one look at the show and was like, I'm Leo McGarry. I want to be Leo McGarry. And I don't know if you've seen The West Wing,
no,
but
I
it
have
is
not. True confession.
So, okay, so we're recording this right in the middle of a global pandemic. It's on Netflix. For those that have not watched it, I strongly suggest it. It is one of my favorite shows. And Leo McGarry is the chief of staff to the president in the show. And he is sort of the person that makes everything happen. He runs all the processes. He sets a lot of the priorities. And nobody really, outside of kind of the DC world of which I live in now, nobody really knows who he is, right? He's not a celebrity. He, can go and live his regular life. But he gets a lot of stuff done. He's known for having a strong kind of like value statement for himself, and for being efficient and effective. And I was like, wow, that's really what I want in my life. So I moved to Washington about 48 hours after I graduated undergrad.
Wow.
Yeah, very quickly. I moved with my then pet hedgehog, Matzo Ball, rest in peace. She was great. She's a great companion. And I got here so fast that the apartment I was supposed to be renting wasn't ready yet. The first tenant was still in it. So I was living in a hotel, and I knew pretty much nobody. And I started out as an unpaid intern at American Security Project, having taken really no political science or international relations classes in the traditional sense. And I started with about 15 to 20 other interns, and we were all doing the same thing, of writing blog posts, attending events, writing blog posts about those events. And I'm a pretty good writer, but I didn't love it. And one of the funny things about Washington is that many people have a pre-professional degree from a very early age. And as you mentioned, and I've said, I went to Wesleyan, and Wesleyan was the perfect place for me and holds a very dear place in my heart, and is many things, but pre-professional is not one of them, thank God.
Yes.
And so I really came from a liberal arts background, and was blessed for that experience to really think about how to think. But I didn't know anything about, there was one guy I remember who was an intern with me who had both an undergraduate and graduate degree by the time he was 25 in water security. And I was like, that is so specific. Right? I was just not at that point. And so everybody was writing these blog posts, and I was really more of a generalist, and was, not as interested in one particular thing as much as I was in all of the things and how they all fit together. And at the time, the CEO, who is a retired Marine Corps general, he didn't have an assistant. His assistant had left. And I marched into his office and said, like, you don't really know me. very well. I'm an intern here. You don't have an assistant and you have me as free unpaid labor until September. Why don't you let me answer your phone? Because you clearly don't want to do it. And to be fair, I mean, that man would answer his own phone. He makes his own coffee. But I was just like, this is not the best use of your time, right? Like, you don't need to answer the phone
Right.
and also be the receptionist and run the organization. Like, that's not, we can have a different division of labor. And I don't know if he didn't take me seriously or was like, floored by the fact that somebody would ask this. But he was like, sure, whatever you want. And so I started out as his assistant and very quickly found that I had a knack for understanding what these incredibly senior retired former military leaders, and some of their civilian counterparts wanted and were trying to achieve, and how they needed their information, and could also understand kind of the civilian industry academic way of communicating, and was able to serve as a bridge between the two. And I think what ultimately, actually answering your question of turning back the clock, I think kind of the common thread in how I was raised and my undergraduate education and my first job, which of course I think really sets kind of the tone, or it can set the tone and trajectory for the rest of your professional life, if you're lucky or unlucky, right up to you, is that I was led by a bunch of leaders rather than managers, right? Like I'm not somebody who is managed well. Anybody who knows me that is watching this show is probably laughing out loud right now. And the only thing worse than managing me is attempting to micromanage me. I mean, it's just, I don't like it. The other person doesn't like it. I don't understand it. And it's not that I don't love working with other people. I do. It's just, it's not how I receive and process information.
Right.
I do much better when someone says to me, like, here is the end goal and here are the rules. I don't care how you get it done, as long as it's the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons kind of situation. And that's very much what I had at ASP. And they had very clear expectations of me. And it was, be honest, right? Don't lie. If you're going to do something, do it all the way. They would say, if you're going to try something, leave a Maggie shaped cutout in the wall. And if you mess up, own it, right? Just tell it. We're not going to be mad at you. Just be honest about it, which worked really well for me, and empowered me to do a lot of things that were way above my pay grade, and probably maybe even still are now, at least in terms of, previous experience as a predictor of what you will find yourself involved in. And so, yeah, I think whenever somebody asks me this, like, how did this happen to you? I'm like, well, it's a strange combination, a strange confluence of events. But I think that's ultimately it, right? If you're led by leaders instead of managers, and that doesn't work for everybody,
Yes.
But it worked for me. And I'm so grateful that that's the situation I found myself in, because the inverse would have been a nightmare.
So it sounds like you had wonderful role models early on that really shaped you and gave you that freedom and opportunity to really bring out the best in you. So today, how do you weave that into your style, and how did you then take your fierceness? Like, when I think of you, I think you're a force. So how did you decide to take your force and open up your own shop?
So I think to say that I decided to, as opposed to it was a thing that happened, to say that I decided would maybe give me a little bit more credit than I deserve. And by that, I mean, it was, again, a strange confluence of events, right? It was sort of like this triangulation of things that occurred that it made it almost like what other option was available to me, right? So NatSecGirlSquad started as a Google group listserv that actually still exists to this day and is quite popular and functional. And it started out when I was at ASP, because as much as I loved and still love many of the mentors and role models and sponsors I had while I was working there, they are, unsurprisingly, with the exception of like one, all men. And they're also, 40 to 50 years older than me. And I spent almost all of my time with them. And by almost all of my time, I mean, I literally lived across the street from two of them, right? Like,
Wow.
it wasn't, no one was forcing me to, like, they were a huge part of my life. And I worked all the time, not because they were always telling me like, cool out, like,
Yes.
you're retired, you're doing
Chill.
a lot. And I was like, but there's more to do. Right. And I learned so much from them, and they were all so different, but at the same time, they had this shared experience. While maybe different services, they all came through the military, right? And I was not in the military. I am not in
Right.
the military. And that meant that I had to find my own glide path, right? I wasn't entering into this service that would then kind of like push me through,
Right.
provide an opportunity for me. I had to figure out my own way. And I started to realize very quickly kind of some of the things I did not want to do. And that with the things I wanted to do, there were really very few women in that space. So when we talk about national security, we often also hear the word foreign policy along with it. They are very much related. And this is the subject of a completely different show, but national security is a part of foreign policy. It is an instrument of policy. And so there are relatively more women in diplomacy, in international development, in foreign policy than there are in the military, in the intelligence community, in national defense, federal law enforcement, things like that. And because I knew that that's kind of the side I wanted to be on,
Yes.
I was really looking for some women from the civilian side who could offer kind of some of their expertise and experience of like, what should I do, right? So I reached out to a number of groups really targeting women in foreign policy and was like, hey, I'm not in the military. I'm not currently in government. I'm not aligned to a specific political party. I know that I don't want to be in international development or diplomacy or foreign policy. Can anybody help me? And like 200 women wrote back to me being like, no, but if
Wow.
you find someone, please let me know. And so this Google group was born, right? This listserv. And it just kept going, right? It started out really just as an information sharing tool, right? Like, here are jobs that are open. Here are internships. Here are events that are happening. I'm going to this. I don't know anybody. I don't want to sit alone, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And it grew and grew and grew over time. And simultaneously, I was at a point in my job where I was very, very happy and had accomplished many of the things I had wanted to accomplish there, and realized that if I didn't leave, I would have stayed forever. And being as young as I was, and frankly still am, I knew that as a woman in a field where there are relatively young women, if I wasn't careful, I would get, slotted in a support position forever. And that's not necessarily what I wanted. And so I had to leave, and it was awful. It was a very hard situation. And the people that told me I needed to leave were my bosses. They were like, we want to keep you forever, but we would do a disservice to the world, is what they said to me, is if we kept you.
Wow.
Which is a really incredible thing to say to somebody who works for you.
Absolutely.
And so I started graduate school while still working full time for the first year. And I worked all through graduate school because I'm a crazy person. And the listserv kept growing. And it kept growing and it kept growing. And a few years into it, somebody said, it would be cool if you did your own event. And I was like, I don't know that that's the kind of life that I want, right? I don't know that I want to be known in that way. Because I realized that doing that would close other doors for me. And so I really resisted it. And basically one day I was like, fuck it, I'll do a happy hour. And so with about 24 hours notice, I said, okay, like, I'm going to be at this bar. If anybody wants to come say hi, I'll be there. And like 150 people showed up. And so I realized, the cat was out of the bag, no pun intended, as my cat is.
Yes, I hear a cat in the background. This is.
Wait, this is real life. This is working from home.
This is working from home.
And yes, I know you're eating the computer cord. That's why I have to pick you up. I'm sorry. You want to be in the interview too. So I kind of couldn't be invisible anymore, basically, right? When 150 people come out of the internet to talk to you. Like the cat is out of the bag. So I was still looking at other jobs though. I was thinking like, what do I want to do with my life? And what happened was that as the listserv was growing, as the community was growing, people knew me as that. And they were like, well, aren't you doing that? Isn't that your job? And I was like, no, I'm a graduate student trying to figure out her life. And then the 2016 election happened and the landscape changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it sort of just kept growing, you know, and I know that's like an oversimplification because there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but I guess I could say we had our first annual conference in November of 2018, and I borrowed a friend's conference room for it. It was a full day. I managed to pull it off for about $3,500, and we had 180 people for 15 hours.
Wow.
This year, or so, which is technically last year, so December of 2019, we did 2 days with 475 people, and we had an exhibitor space, and we had government agencies come and speak, and we had 16 breakout sessions, 8 panels, 4 podcasts. We had a clothing retailer, we had manicures. It is a completely different beast now. And now in the middle of a global pandemic, we are completely virtual and doing something called NatSecGirlSquad goes antiviral. And typically we do, you know, in regular life, we do 7 to 12 events a month.
Wow.
We're not doing 7 to 12 events a day.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a lot happening here. And, you know, and also in the last year, we built a partnership with a government contracting agency so that we can do the work that we do inside federal government. We've done a ton of research with a professor down at the University of Alabama to better understand the challenges women face in entering the field and once they're in. And it has taken on a life that I could not have imagined. And now we, you know, in addition to the dog, we have a cat. So.
Because you do not have enough on your plate.
Right. And I should give credit where credit is due. The dog found the cat in a box in the woods and was like, this is mine now. So, you know.
This is my buddy.
Yeah, this is it. I was like, great. I've never had a cat before, as all of our viewers can now see.
So you've talked about the importance of mentors and sponsors because those were the people that you learned from. Those are the people who pushed you, said, it's time. We're going to let you fly. So for people who are looking for their own mentors and sponsors, what advice do you have for them?
So this is a really good question, and it's something I think about a lot because in my job I deal a lot with, so NatSecGirlSquad works with about 30,000 people every month, which saying that out loud every time I say it seems ridiculous to me. And up until, you know, maybe 6 or 12 weeks ago, somewhere in there, I was storing everybody's personal data, every single person, on an index card. And then it just got too big and we ran out of space. And I guess the reason I think of that as relevant to this question is that it's so personal, right? I think there are some good rules of thumb, but you have different mentors and sponsors for different points in your life. And I found that the people that are my best sponsors, which is different from a mentor, right? I think of mentor as the person who may give you advice and is a little bit more passive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You need those people. And sponsors are those who kind of roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and will think of you when you are not thinking of them, right? So if they hear of an opportunity, they will advocate on your behalf before they even check in with you sometimes, right?
Yes.
They see the opportunities that you don't know exist, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say, like I said, you need different kinds of mentors and sponsors for different parts of your life. My sponsors right now who have the biggest role in my life are the ones that I also count as friends, which I think is different than that of a mentor. And some of that is my personality, and who I put in my mentor category, right? I put most of the officers I work for in the mentor category, which is to say that if I need something or I want their advice, they are always there for me. And anytime I want to check in with them, they will, pick up the phone, respond to the email, whatever, get lunch. But it's not, they're not necessarily reaching out to me as much as I'm reaching out to them, right? And I think I still refer to them as sir. Like they're like, you can call me by my first name. I'm like, that's never going to happen. Whereas my friends who I think of as sponsors, I call them by their first name. I text them. I'm on the phone with them at all hours. It's a different kind of relationship. And there's not that you're dishonest with your mentors, because I think in both cases, you need to be able to hear no. You need to be able to hear that you're wrong. And I think mentors are the people that will tell you they disagree with you and you say, okay, thank you. Sponsors are the people that are like, I think you're wrong. And you say back to them, I think you are wrong. And then you kind of duke it out, right? And you have that conversation and you see, and some of my sponsors tell me they think I'm wrong merely to put me through the thought exercise, right, of proving my own point. So I do think it's really personal, and it depends on your personality and your needs and kind of what you can take. I do better with really direct communication. And so that's what I need in a sponsor or a mentor. And I get very overwhelmed and nervous about kind of like the elegant peacock dance of the other thing. And that's why I'm not a diplomat.
I think the message here is to know thyself and to be really honest in figuring out who you are and what you need in a mentor or sponsor in advancing your career or things you want to do in the community or whatever it is. Very, very important. And one of the things I admire about you is that you are who you are and
Yes.
unapologetically, and that's great. And I love that you do this for other women, and to say, don't be afraid to be yourself, and here's how you could be authentic, and this is how you can succeed, and success looks differently for different people, and you don't have to have one model of success. Which really brings me to my next question, which is about, tell me about being resilient, especially during this time. People are figuring it out, what is quote unquote the new way of being, the new normal. How do you be resilient?
So I think I have a lot of help. And it's not, I'm somebody who does not have a dimmer switch, right? I'm either 100% on or completely off. And I'm a lot like my father, and my father's name is Stuart and his nickname is Tsunami. And it's totally accurate, right? And I'm that way too. And I have no levels, right? I'm either like totally on or totally off. And I know that about myself, and that helps. But it also means that I struggle with limits for myself, right? I'm really good at recognizing that other people have limits, and that like self-care is important. Yes. I'm terrible at taking care of myself, in the sense that it's not something that comes naturally to me. It's something that I've always struggled with. And I mentioned this to NatSecGirlSquad members pretty frequently. Like, I have been hospitalized several times for exhaustion, and I know better, but I struggle at seeing the signs in myself, because I'm like, I'm just going to keep going because I've got stuff to get done. So that's not something that is natural to me, right? Like, knowing my limits. And so I surround myself with people who that does come more naturally to. And I think that's an important, part of building anything, whether you're building your own life, you're building a business, whatever it is like, you want people around you who balance you, right? If you're just surrounded by replicas of yourself, it's terrible, for a lot of reasons. But having people around you who force you to unplug, who force you to take a break, who make you stop and take a breath and say, is this really what you want, is incredibly helpful. I also think my resiliency in terms of what I'm doing now comes very much from the fact that it means so much to me, right? I believe very, very deeply in NatSecGirlSquad's mission, and I believe perhaps even more deeply in its impact. So by that, I mean, I truly believe that the way to make America and the entire, kind of global society stronger, more stable, more prosperous, more secure is through a competent and diverse workforce. Like, I actually believe that. It's not just, a bunch of talking points. I lose sleep over it. It's like, it's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. I really, really, really care a lot about it. So that helps, because even, when you're hitting a wall with somebody, you can find a way over, through, around said wall if it is, your real mission. I also have things in my life, and you mentioned one of them, that are very separate from my work. So I sing. That has always been something that I do. It is very separate from the rest of my profession.
Yes.
But it's just as important to me. And so I think, like, having that balance, I think some people I've heard call it like a counterbalance. And I think that's unfair, because it places less emphasis on one thing over the other.
Yes.
To me, it's like they have to be both equally important, not necessarily at the exact same time, right? Like, there are different hours of the day where some things are more important to me than others. But I think having another place to put my energy
Yes.
is helpful. And I call them like bumpers, right? Like when you're like from
Yes.
bowling, right? Like, I am somebody who would not put bumpers in on myself, but very much needs that. So having people in your life that can call you out, and I don't just mean, the moment before you're going to be hospitalized for exhaustion. I mean, like, on a daily basis.
Yes.
I'm the kind of person who, if it's not written in my calendar, I won't do it. And that includes eating. It doesn't enter my mind to eat. It just doesn't happen, which is like not normal. And I spent a long time like fighting that. Because I think, especially as women, we are socialized to think that we're supposed to have a certain set of skills and be a certain way. And a lot of those things don't come naturally to me. And then some of the other stuff are kind of like life hacks I figured out, like that decision fatigue is very real for me. And so the way I organize my closet is key. So that and I love clothes. I love all of that. Like, I'm known for my hair and my nails.
Yeah.
And I've decided my hair and my nails are going to be the thing for me. And what I
Got
wear
it.
is just like, it's a sea of black at this point. And I just, I have a partnership with Lafleur. They dress me. I don't even have to think about what to buy. They just send me the clothes. I put it on my body and I live my life. It's great. And it gives me some time back, and it reduces the mental load, which I think really helps with the resilience.
I'm so glad that you shared with us about self-care. I find that with many women, that's so hard. There's somehow some guilt that gets associated with that. And I try to spread the message to people, no, it's not guilt. It's not being selfish. It's actually about being selfless, because if you are not grounded and taking care of yourself, how could you be present for all the different people and your cat and your dog, right? If you're not taking care of yourself. So appreciate you mentioning that. And the other thing I took away from this particular question was about being accountable and having people in your life who help you to be accountable, and how you use your calendar even to remind you to eat. I know that people have it in their calendar, and I've even seen calendar pages like this where there are slots for drinking water.
Yep, I'm that person. Yeah.
And it's important, but because you're so passionate about what you're doing, you can easily lose track of time.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is just use the tools that you have available to you. If it doesn't come natural, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been so interesting to me kind of during this move to virtual, especially in the national security space, right, is a lot of people who put everything they have and everything they are into their jobs, right? They're very mission
Yes.
driven, and maybe they are considered mission essential right now, so they're still working, but they're only
Yes.
working 10 days on, 10 days off, or they're supposed to be teleworking and that really limits the work they can do, or they're not considered mission essential. And for a lot of people who are actually quite high up in the apparatus, they're they're not considered mission essential for a certain number of days because maybe they're focused more on strategic planning rather than like right now,
Yes.
right? So they're actually like
Yes.
very essential generally, and it's been a long time since anyone told them they're not essential, right? And
Yes.
now have this amount of time and they're like, I have no idea what to do, right? We've put all of ourselves into our work, and especially as women, like that sense of usefulness is so important to how we've been socialized, and and self-care being felt and seen as selfish, and looking
Yes.
around and seeing everybody else is doing 12 other things. And then on top of that, of course, women disproportionately are responsible for home life, right? Kids, pets, groceries, things like that. And
Yes.
those are deeply embedded, complex. Like the patriarchy is real. It's both out there and in here, and it's a lot to unpack. And it's in the middle of a global pandemic, which is very stressful. And so watching people who are used to being such high and overachievers now struggle because they're working from home and their job is fundamentally different, and they have kids, and maybe people they work with didn't even know they had kids, and their kids are home from school because they've got nothing to do, and the internet can only handle so many people on it at one time, and so things are slow, and you're sharing parts of your life with people you never intended to share it with, and it's exhausting. And watching other people rise to the occasion to take this as an opportunity to do more and be more can be very hard. And it's an interesting I get to watch a lot and I get to do a lot.
Yes. Yes.
um, and I think most of what I do depends on what I see, right? And so that's something I'm seeing a lot of. And um, I think the idea that, particularly for women in defense and national security, that these issues of who you are regular, right, have everything
Yes.
to do with who you are at work. And because of the work that we do, like it has to be less embarrassing to admit that,
Yeah.
because there's just there's a NatSecGirlSquad member who was telling me she was, I guess, like 8 months pregnant with twins, and she was going to do the daily briefing for the FBI director, and she was like ready. It was like her first day doing it. She was super excited, and she had like a Snickers bar in her pants pocket, and what she didn't know is that it had melted and was completely underneath, right? And she was the only woman in the room, and she got up and did the briefing, and everybody saw it but nobody said anything to her, and she saw it afterwards when she goes to the bathroom, and she's like, what the hell, why would nobody tell me that, right? And they're like, we didn't know what to do, and it's like, if another woman had been in the room, someone would have freaking told her. But between that and the amount of time we all spend trying to figure out what to wear for a briefing or just a regular day at the office,
Yes.
what to pack on a trip, things that all women in all parts of life deal with, but especially women in male-dominated fields. And when everybody else is in a uniform and you're a civilian and you're not in a uniform, and that creates some sort of power dichotomy anyways, I found that just being honest about the fact that like these are things that weigh on us and take emotional and mental energy, and actually just dealing with them and not making it a big deal, just being like, this is a part of my job, I need to make this decision, I need to do this thing,
Yeah.
gives so much energy back. And I think like creates, like, it helps build resiliency, right? Because you can't leave 80% of who you are at the door when you go to work for anybody.
Yes.
but especially if you're the 2 a.m. watch commander. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a weird little snowball to live in. And so I think our only hope is resiliency. Otherwise, we are so screwed.
So in closing this out in the next few minutes, what is a key takeaway or phrase that you would like people to remember about this conversation we're having today?
Oh, this is a good one. Normally when people ask me this, I have my, like, if you're soft on defense, if you're soft on diversity, you're soft on defense, right? Like, if you don't care about this, you
Yes.
don't care about America spiel, which I still 100% believe, but is not really the question you're asking me. But I think you kind of said it, right? This idea that, like, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And the better you know yourself, the better you can take care of yourself, and then the better you can choose to take care of other people. And I think it's the choice that matters, right? If we're doing it out of default, if we're
Yeah.
doing it because we just feel like we're supposed to and we don't know how else to do it, you're not actually taking care of them, right? You're doing it from a very different place.
Yes. Yes.
And I think you have to be able to wake up every day and choose to do it. And you're allowed to, want to do something on Monday and not want to do it on Tuesday and go back to doing it on Wednesday. Like, you are allowed to check in with yourself and change your mind 80 times.
Yes.
I'm a fan of that.
And so I think what I take away is really being empowered by choice. We have
Yeah.
a lot of choice, and that's something that we get to control, is our choices and decisions.
Yeah.
So Maggie, how can people find you? I
Sure.
want you to be found. I want your messages out there in the world.
Thank you. So our website is NatSecGirlSquad.com. And you can find us, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I think those are kind of the only social media outlets I really use. My Twitter, you can find, and the company's Twitter, you can find, if you just type in NatSecGirlSquad, you'll see both of us pop up. And you can find me on LinkedIn. But our website really has, all of our daily programming is both live and on demand. So recognizing that our community has a variety of shifts, we record as much as we can, and we've got really a little bit of everything. So we have, I think today we've got Chinese 101 for national security policy making. We've also
goodness.
Yeah, like, we have that happening, and then we have working with difficult people in difficult times. My much beloved hair colorist is doing a session for people who are like, I color my hair and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and
yes,
I do this outside. We've got a yoga class today, and all of that stuff. That schedule is up right online. And all the information about how to partner with us, how to join, all of that is on our website.
Fantastic. So again, that's NatSecGirlSquad.com. You can find Maggie and her company on LinkedIn and Twitter. And Maggie, I have to say, thank you so much. You've been really generous with your time, with your insights, and so honored to be in your presence today. So thank you again. You are quite welcome. My pleasure. So stay tuned, everyone, for the next episode of Resiliency Empowerment Seminar today.